Greetings. It's Monday, May the 12th, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. India and Pakistan seem to have come close, very close, to going over the brink, but they didn't. A ceasefire came about after what has been reported to have been hundreds of fighter planes engaged in dogfights, along with missiles, drones, and artillery going back and forth across the border at each other. The ceasefire seems to be holding for now. The U.S. was directly involved, mostly on the Pakistani side, it seems. There's talk that the American side dangled provisional release of a $1 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund if Pakistan would play along. Yeah, money again. Now, this whole mess has blown away all the agreements between those two countries, so a lot of diplomatic work is going to have to start all over again. The biggest fear is that the whole thing will affect the Indus Water Treaty. Now, that was signed by India and Pakistan back in 1960 and was designed to manage the scarce water resources in that region for the benefit of all concerned. India says it was suspending that agreement, and that is going to be a problem if it stays that way, because all countries will go to war over critical resources, all of them. And besides air, nothing is more critical than water. It's touch and go right now, and China is still in a position where they could be dragged into any renewed conflict, but for the time being, two of the world's less than stable nuclear states are letting the dust settle. For now. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV is settling into his new job at the Vatican. The media has been going overtime into the Roman Catholic Church's first American pope, and some of the strangest statements have been coming out from the mainstream media that have made me kind of cringe. Something along the lines of, Pope Leo is the first American pope in 2,000 years. Well, the U.S. has not been around for 2,000 years. It's not even been around for 500 years. Actually, it's just celebrating its 250th anniversary. Somebody has to teach these people mathematics. That I think would be a big help. Because otherwise, why would they be saying something so silly? It's like saying, that's the best fast food pizza since the days of Julius Caesar. Okay, true, but quite irrelevant. Oh, and have you seen all the AI-generated reports on the new pope popping up on YouTube and elsewhere? Really, narratives and graphics, all included, generated by this monstrous entity known as artificial intelligence. Everything from how he is the second coming to his election being the fulfillment of some dark prophecy of doom, the Antichrist, or the tool of Donald Trump. I mean, it's all out there, and it's all generated by what is arguably intelligent artificial intelligence. It's a very clear demonstration of the sort of craziness that is being played on people's thoughts by this infernal system. Oh, and Pope Leo agrees. One of the first statements he made is that artificial intelligence is a threat to humanity. I couldn't agree more, Your Holiness. I couldn't agree more. Elsewhere, direct talks between Ukraine's Zelensky and Russia's Putin may be happening in Turkey real soon, although lots of statements and counter-statements coming from both sides as to what's going to be talked about where and how and the usual sort of thing. President Trump is obviously frustrated, but is now apparently siding with Ukraine and calling out Russia for wanting to take over the country. That really doesn't make too much sense. It's been talked about that he basically takes the opinion of the last person he speaks to and goes from there, but Washington, if it runs on anything, runs on rumors, innuendo, and ambition, and usually all three of those can be tied together. This war would have been over almost instantly had the Trump administration pulled all funding and weapons supplies to Ukraine back in January. They didn't. And as a result, lots of young men and women on both sides are no longer alive. But, of course, stopping the war that way by just pulling the plug on it, that would have made too much sense. And it wouldn't have made too much money for some people, a very few some people. And keeping on the topic of the military-industrial complex, the falling out between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has sent shockwaves through what has been called the Zionist White House. Trump is also now calling for the end of the war in Gaza in much of the same tone he called for the end of the war in Ukraine. Why is this significant? Well, for years there has been a growing resentment in Washington and elsewhere in the United States about how much influence and control Israel has over U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy. And the billions upon billions of dollars that has been given to the Jewish state for decades, that's finally come to a head. The recently proposed law making organization or participation in a boycott against Israel punishable by a 20-year prison sentence and a $1 million fine, well, that seems to have been the straw that broke the camel's back, pun not intended. And there's no chance of that law going anywhere, or that bill going anywhere at this point. This pushback will more than likely lead to a new, very different relationship between the two countries. Watch and wait. And speaking of domestic problems, the air traffic control system in New Jersey is reporting issues again. That's, I don't know how many times it's been the last few weeks. There are promises by the FAA to implement new systems throughout the country. Brand new systems, brand new computers, brand new procedures, all sorts of things. But realistically, that should have been done decades ago. Unfortunately, lots of other projects and other countries needed the money of the American taxpayer. Yeah, all that money going overseas to help people. That when we let our infrastructure just go to pot, there's more to infrastructure, people, than just potholes on a highway. Americans have a very bad habit of not fixing a safety issue until something bad happens. Like not putting up a street light at a busy intersection until some child gets run over by a car. Why is that? Really, why? I've never been able to figure that one out. Let's just hope that plane loads of people don't meet with the same sort of fate as little Betsy on her bicycle. And if it happens, several presidential administrations will be to blame. And all of them will have some of the blood on their hands. Now, speaking of airplanes, there's lots of talk this morning about the Trump White House accepting a 747-8 from the Qatar government to serve as an interim Air Force One until Boeing gets its act together and delivers the replacements for the current planes. Those planes are years overdue and way over budget. Now, that's not a bad idea. That's a very good idea to accept this gift, quote unquote, because the aircraft being used as Air Force One right now are old, very old, too old. They date from the late 1980s. Boeing started building them in 1986 and delivered them to the Air Force in 1990. So they've been flying for the president since George Bush I. That is too long ago. They are not only horrendously expensive to maintain, they're dangerous. Air Force One is dangerous. The previous jets that had been in service before the current planes, they were in service for 23 years and 13 years respectively. And that was thought to have been too long back then. Trump is able to bypass any budgetary considerations and at the same time get something safe for himself and other VIPs to fly until Boeing decides to make good on what it's supposed to do. It should be pointed out also that the two current Air Force One jets were in service after only 5 years from being ordered. 5 years. They were ordered in 85, and by 1990 they were flying. So much has changed since we decided to toss our manufacturing base to other countries. And it hasn't changed for the better. Now, whether you like Trump or not, he's right on many things. Mostly the need to bring back a manufacturing base to the United States and the critical skill sets that make such infrastructure of making things possible. Boeing has been struggling for years to produce a couple of airplanes of the kinds they had made before, more or less, and they can't do that anymore. A lot of it's being blamed on the insane DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This has destroyed not only our way of doing things, but our way of thinking. And we can see it with the fact that the President of the United States can't get his airplanes taken care of or put together properly. Being able to make things and being able to have an educated population capable of making things is a daunting task for any civilization, but a critical task for a civilization in danger of dying. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, and hope you can make them friends someday. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the Deep State must be destroyed. Good day.